Hello, everybody. Welcome in to the NBA Front Office Show. I'm Trevor Lane, joined by Keith Smith. We've got plenty to talk about today. We've got a new deal for Brandon Ingram, Kevin Durant, maybe on the trade market. The Pistons buying. That was a fun shift for them. And then the Lakers make a move in the middle. Keith, lots of stuff to get into, but got to admit, I'm also kind of looking ahead here to the All-Star break. I've got a little bit of that senioritis that I'm expected to see in some of the games around the NBA right now, where you could tell teams are kind of ready for a week off.
Yeah, the Chicago Bulls last night down 71-29 at halftime. If that was against the Cavs or the Thunder or the Celtics, you'd be like, all right, sure. It was against the Pistons, who take nothing away from the Pistons, who we're going to talk about later, and are playing well, but come on. What are you doing? And then they play again tonight, which is even funnier. I can't imagine the Bulls can be any worse than they were in the first half. But yeah, this is always a funny time in the league, especially tonight and tomorrow, because teams are playing their final games before everybody heads off to some of them to the All-Star game, some of them to vacation, and generally that means to a beach and somewhere warm and nice. And yeah, you're absolutely right. There's some senioritis. So, I'm not gonna lie, I have a little senioritis too myself, because I'm a little ready for a little bit of a break. But what's also funny is by Sunday, I'm gonna be like, I wish there was real games on. I'm gonna dive deep into college basketball over the next week and all that stuff to get caught up on scouting. There's some good windows to watch some international games, so I'm excited about all that.
Yeah, I'm going to be the same way, I'm sure. It usually only takes a few days of okay, that's enough rest. I'm ready for there to be more stuff out there. Let's go here. A move that took place yesterday. Brandon Ingram got a new contract with his new team, the Toronto Raptors. Now, looks like he's getting about $40 million per season here for the Raptors now, but the third year a player option. Do you like this deal? The reporting had been that Ingram was seeking somewhere around $50 million a year from the Pelicans, and that was part of the reason why they ultimately decided to move him.
Yeah, I do like this one. I think this is a really solid deal. We broke it down live sort of yesterday, but that was all we had, was that it was happening. But I do like this. I think this is a fair value for Ingram, more based on what he is when he's healthy. And I watched the whole of that Raptors-Sixers game last night. Yeah. And you can see what that team could be when everyone is there, meaning they've got role players right now playing okay. Guys like Jonathan Mobo and Jamal Shed and Ochai Agbaji, they're doing well, but they're going to look a lot better when they're like the 8th, 9th, and 10th men versus being starters and guys who are playing 30 minutes a night. So you could see how this is going to start to sort of come together. And I'm excited for the Raptors because I think Ingram gives them another guy alongside Scotty Barnes and Emmanuel Quickly, who can really do a lot of stuff. We're going to get to an RJ Barrett topic in a little bit, but it is very interesting with him as well, because that's a lot of guys who can create with the ball in their hands, but outside of Quickly, none of them are like true knockdown shooters. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be a little bit of the balance. Jakob Poeltl, not a shooter at the center spot either. But I think that they're going to be funky and a little weird, maybe a little old school, which, hey, all the old heads who don't like all the threes, maybe the Raptors will become their team. But they're going to be fun to watch, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. This is going to be, I think, a fun group. I don't know that they've got, championship upset. And that's where I've seen a lot of the responses. Well, what are the Raptors doing? Why would they? This doesn't make them a title contender. So why do this? Why even bother? And I think sometimes we get so locked into putting a team in a bucket as either a contender or you're tanking. And sometimes you have to build in order to get to that contender status. It takes having a few pieces, and then you're a move away. You can make that move and then really make that push, because that is a lot of the reaction. I've seen a lot of people say it's an overpay. I mean, look, I know he's got health issues and has had issues staying on the floor, but when he's on the floor, he's a very, very, very good player. So I do think that this deal does make some sense. If he has injury issues, then maybe you worry a little bit about the player option or something. But this Raptors team is definitely one that can be on the playoff mix next year in the Eastern Conference. And then we'll see what they do from there to take that next step. But I think this is a step towards contention, towards winning basketball. Doesn't mean they're in that contender status just yet, but it doesn't have to be, one move and suddenly you get there. I think this is putting them on the path to try to make that push up in the East.
Yeah, I completely agree with all that. A couple other thoughts. Ingram is the kind of guy they would not get in free agency.
Yeah.
One, he's not going to go there. Two, that's just a place where guys don't necessarily look to go, and they don't have, or two was supposed to be, they don't have the cap space to be able to pull that off. So by doing it via trade and then extending him, that's big. That gives the Raptors, a guy they wouldn't get otherwise. I think we forget too, because he came into the league so young. He's only 27. Like, I think there's this thought that he's already in his 30s, and he's not. He's, he's not a kid by any means, but like he should have plenty of good years left in him. And I also think with this team, maybe when he starts to feel something in his ankle, go sit. Go sit.
Sure.
We've got enough coverage on the wing to go. And the last thing I'll say as they build this roster out, this team has a top 5 pick very likely coming, unless they're extremely unlucky in the lottery. And that's huge because they're going to get another really good player. Yeah. There's a lot of guys, even if they're in like the 5th pick range, there you're talking guys like VJ Edgecombe, Kasparis Yakushonis from Illinois. Like, those are the guys that are guards, ball handlers, creators that can fit this team. If they wanted to go a little bit bigger, they could go with a guy who's kind of zooming up draft boards, but a guy like Derek Queen, if they felt like they needed to go with somebody who's going to be more of a 4-5 at the NBA level. So there's a lot of optionality coming here for the Raptors as they go into this. And adding that pick as now you're getting expensive, that's huge because mostly teams add, when they get expensive, you're adding a pick that's in the late teens to mid 20s. You're not necessarily adding a pick that's going to be a top 5 pick. And, and they got there on their own. If we're being completely fair, they didn't outsource the tank to anybody else. They got there themselves. But, I think future is extremely bright in Toronto.
Yeah, agreed. I do think it's a bright future. And, the draft pick may indeed pour some gasoline on their fire here that they've got going. All right. Let's jump over to Phoenix, where instead of trading for a player, they might be trading away a player, sounding more and more likely, according to ESPN's Brian Windhorst, that Kevin Durant is going to be traded this summer. Keith, you look at the Suns, their big three, Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant, and Devin Booker. They're just not good enough with those three guys on the floor. They've got a below 500 record right now, and it seems like this is headed towards yet another Kevin Durant trade saga. As excited as I am to get to use the Kevin cannon more, I can't wait for that. Is this the right decision? Is it moving Kevin Durant, or is that just the only decision that the Suns have that they can really make here?
It's a combination of the two. I do think it is their only decision. I think they have reached the point where they know they can't move Bradley Beal. They're not going to find a trade that works for them and works for him. They did work canvassing the entire league and couldn't find anything that worked for him and the Suns themselves. Devin Booker seems to be off the table. They don't want to talk about trading him. Devin Booker has gone on the record saying doesn't want to play anywhere else in his career. That makes sense. You have an in his prime superstar. Keep him. The only way I think you trade Booker is if this whole thing bottoms out and it's like Durant goes and then you really start falling apart. Then maybe it is, all right, Houston, we know you have all our picks now. Like, you want Devin Booker? Let's figure this out together, how we move forward. Maybe that's how it goes. So that leaves you with, it's got to be Kevin Durant. All the other stuff is fine. You could do more Yusuf Nurkic-like moves with Grayson Allen and Royce O'Neal, and you could do moves where you're just positioning to try to get under the second apron and all kinds of stuff that way. But if you want to make the big move, it's got to be Kevin Durant. I think it'll look similar to Jimmy Butler, not in terms of being a months-long saga, but in terms of multiple teams get involved, the Suns get back win now players, and that's how we move this forward. So it's going to be really fun to track this. But I'm just going to go on record saying over under between now and July. We'll do, however many shows we do, in that period. We're probably going to talk about this on more than half of them. The rest of the way, because we're just going to get new snippets of information about Team X is gearing up to make a run at Kevin Durant, and Team Y is out on Kevin Durant. We're going to get all kinds of stuff like that as we go.
You look at his numbers, he is still absolutely crushing it. He's still great, even though he's 36. There's a number of teams that will be interested in Kevin Durant. So that will indeed
to KD, 30K and points.
Yeah, that's
night.
right.
Like, huge. I mean, massive accomplishment. If there weren't a couple guys named MJ and LeBron James in front of him, we might be talking about KD as the all-time leading scorer in the league someday. And LeBron's going to put that thing pretty far out there for, I'm going to say, our lifetimes. I don't know that anybody touches it, but
every point he scores is setting a new record right now. It's crazy.
I think they should stop the game every time he scores a basket and give him the ball and have a big ceremony.
Games are long enough as it is, Keith. We don't need that. All right.
It was funny. Have you seen the thing on like, what's the over-under on Lakers versus Dodgers games this year? Which ones are going to take longer? Because with LeBron, Luka, and Austin Reeves, you have three guys that are pretty good free throw merchants. Like, you might have games where Laker games are like, cool, we're on our 70th free throw attempt tonight, and we've been here for 3.5 hours, and we're just wrapping up the fourth quarter, midway through. Like,
the other night it was Lakers Pacers, and they combined for like 50, 60. It was something crazy, and it wasn't even mostly Lakers players. It was Pascal Siakam with the head flail of doom. It was crazy.
Yeah, he does a pretty good job getting himself to the line as well.
That's for sure. All right, before we leave the topic, I have to.
Fire!
Oh, I love that we're going to get more use out of that one.
Fire the Kevin cannon. Let's go.
Fire it. All right.
All of this stupidity started with me finding a siren sound effect because we had to talk about Ben Simmons every single day.
That's right. The Simmons siren.
And then you're like, I'm going to take it like 58 steps further, and all in a wonderful direction.
And it's all just goofy and whatever. It's fun though.
Yep.
It's fun. All right. The Lakers have added Alex Len. Not a surprise after, Keith, we saw the news broke, what was it, a couple days ago, that Len was reversing course and was not joining the Indiana Pacers. Once that happened, okay, obviously it's not coincidence that the Lakers, the Mark Williams trade had just fallen apart. Suddenly Alex Len isn't going to the Pacers. Obviously the two things are probably connected. So now the Lakers get a big man to put in the middle, and they did waive Christian Wood, who actually said he was nearing a return on X yesterday, which was interesting. But Keith, your thoughts on the move? For me, I've summed it up on Lakers Nation. He's a big body. He's not going to like take over the starting job and be the guy 30 minutes a night or whatever. But he's just a solid veteran, big body that they can use out there.
Yeah, this is the kind of move you make as you start looking down the line, which the Lakers are, obviously well positioned to do. You start looking at, all right, we may have a matchup with Denver coming our way. What about Oklahoma City with Hartenstein? What about the Clippers with Zubac? The Rockets with Şengün? Rudy Gobert in Minnesota? Memphis to some extent, Zach Edey, maybe, but you're looking at those teams. Sabonis with the Kings, if it goes that way. You're starting to look at, we need another big body to throw out there. If one, just a different look from Jackson Hayes, who's much more of an athletic speed kind of player at the big spot, and just another body to throw out there. If nothing else, he's 6 fouls. You can put him on the floor in a playoff series. I think between him and Hayes, I put it this way this morning on a radio spot, you have now 25 to 30 minutes of center play, and it's on JJ Redick to scheme through the other 15 to 20 minutes of center play that you need to get each night. And that's probably going to be a lot of small ball options. That'll be LeBron, Rui, Jared Vanderbilt, bunch of guys, masquerading. Dorian Finney-Smith, and we said this when he got traded. He had been playing mostly as a backup 5 in Brooklyn before he came to the Lakers. That was where a lot of his minutes were coming from. So that's another guy you can play, especially when you get into bench units on these second teams. But that's what the Lakers are looking at. They're looking down the line. What do we need here? Alex Len's not going to be, if Alex Len comes out and all of a sudden starts scoring, 10 points and grabbing 10 rebounds and he's a double-double machine, it'll be like, well, where's this been for a decade of your career? Like, what's going on? But this is fine. The Christian Wood part of it, I get nobody knows where he's at better in his recovery than the Lakers do as far as the team goes. So my guess is for them, it was if we can add Alex Len, we don't necessarily need Christian Wood anymore anyway. We're not going to have 12 centers on this roster. So let's go, kind of like for like positionally, switch them out that way, and we'll see. And then if Christian Wood looks awesome and they're like, you know what, we need him back, there's another move that they could make later and always bring Christian Wood back if they want to. They're not restricted from re-signing him in any way.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So right now, what this Alex Len number comes in at is going to be critical with all of this. The Lakers are right now about $800,000 below the second tier apron, which they are hard capped at. If this, Keith, we've talked about this, if the Lakers dipped into their non-taxpayer mid-level, or I'm sorry, their taxpayer mid-level, and used that to give him more than the prorated veteran minimum, then this will be it. They'd be done. If they did not, and it does indeed come in at just a prorated veteran minimum, then they do have another move. They could waive another player and sign a free agent. They could bump up one of their two-way guys to a full contract. You could bring back Christian Wood if he returns to health. You could still have some optionality there, but it all depends on what that Alex Len contract actually comes in at.
Confirm, and we have not added, because I just before we got on here, I did get confirmation it is a veteran minimum for Alex Len. So I can confirm it's a veteran minimum. They'll have another contract that they could sign roughly the same size. It prorates down by about $11,000 each day with this. So 730 some odd thousand, but I can confirm it is a veteran minimum signing for Alex Len.
All right, breaking news there then. So that's a big deal for the Lakers. Does give them another potential move. I'll talk a bit more about that, of course, on Lakers Nation. But for given the circumstances, this is more than fine. I think for the Lakers, they get a big body, 250-pound guy, 7 feet tall. That gives you something that you can use in the middle that Jackson Hayes just doesn't have. I still think, Keith, Jackson Hayes is going to start. I think he's going to keep the starting job here.
Agreed.
And if anything, from this whole Mark Williams saga, the big winner is Jackson Hayes, who is going to get every opportunity to prove that he should get whatever he gets on his next contract.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, 100% with that one. That is yeah, I mean, and he looked good, right? And it's, a lot was made about Luka wants to play with a rim running, lob catching big. Well, Jackson Hayes can do that, right? Yeah. And that's, it's all he has to do is catch those lobs, because he does occasionally go through these periods where he fumbles them out of bounds and other stuff. He doesn't have the best hands in the world. And then just not commit stupid fouls. Just be solid. Like, that's it. Just be solid. You don't then and you can be aggressive too, because that's what adding Len gives you as well. Jackson Hayes, he doesn't have to play passively. Like, if he picks up a couple fouls, okay, it's not the end of the world. We got another guy we can throw out there for that. I'll say this on Alex Len too, just to kind of close the book on this. Every year, the Kings tried to replace him in the rotation for like the last few years. And every year, by the time we get to the end of the year, including when they made the playoffs a couple of years ago, he was back in the rotation as Sabonis' primary backup. Again, Sabonis is a very high minute player, so we're talking playoffs 10 minutes, but that's what we're talking here as well. 10, 15 minutes by the time we get to playoff time. And as long as it's 10 to 15 minutes that aren't, one of those negative 20 blitzes and it all falls apart there. And I trust JJ Redick to understand, all right, we got to be careful with when we use them here. We can't use them. All right, they're going to their small speed lineup. Then it's not going to work. Then he'll downsize it appropriately and it'll be there. So yeah, I don't want to get crazy over a minimum signing late in the year, but a good solid depth pickup for the Lakers.
All right, let's go here. We talked a little bit about the Toronto Raptors already. RJ Barrett could be traded by the team. Now, there were a few kind of very minor trade rumors involving RJ Barrett at the trade deadline. Nothing too substantial where you thought, okay, this is really going to happen, but it was enough to take notice of. Now we've got rumors that he could actually be on the move here this summer. Is this just a symptom of the Brandon Ingram situation? Because I thought RJ Barrett has played fairly well for the Raptors. So what's the motivation here to potentially move on from him if you're Toronto?
Yeah, I think it's just balance, right? Yeah. It is. We kind of mentioned it before. It's a lot of fun that they have all these guys that can do stuff with the ball in their hands, but none of them are really knockdown shooters. So that's where you can very quickly tip from this is fun to we have now too much of this,
Right.
and we need somebody who can make shots. And that could be where RJ Barrett could be the one who it is. Ingram's not going anywhere. We just signed him. We just extended Scotty Barnes. Quickly's on the big contract. It could be, all right, Barrett's the guy then to get moved. Pretty reasonable number now. It's funny. There was a point where it's like, that's too much for RJ Barrett. This contract is crazy. And now it's like under 30 million. It's like, okay, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Not going to kill you. And there are teams where I think he could go and be a big help. If it is one of those teams where it's like, man, they need another guy who can do, like we talked about that with the Warriors a lot, right? Where they just don't have anybody who can do anything with the ball in their hands. Even the Lakers, pre-Luka, we had that conversation of there's not a lot of shot creation on this team. So now those two teams are out, but there'll be 2, 4, 5, 6, 7 other teams this summer that'll be in that same position. Then if you could trade RJ Barrett for, all right, we're rebalancing with another shooter or another guy who's a better off-ball player, that's probably what you're looking at if you're Toronto, as well as they're pretty expensive now too. So if you could bring your salary number down a little bit, get well clear of the tax line and rebalance the rotation a little, that's probably the direction you would like to go if you're Toronto.
Yeah, absolutely. So that we'll see. Again, Keith, that's great. We just had the trade deadline, and already the trade market this summer is heating up. Now we've got RJ Barrett, Kevin Durant potentially out there. Keith, one of my favorite stories in the NBA this season, it's been the Detroit Pistons and their rise. Right now, they are a playoff team in the East, not play-in. And you love seeing that. They play extremely hard every single night. They're on a 3-game win streak. And the way they've been playing led this team that most would have projected to be a seller at the trade deadline to flipping and becoming a buyer. I do like this Detroit Pistons side. They're not ready to make a real run in the Eastern Conference, but I think, Keith, they're going to get some very valuable playoff experience this year. We saw what they did to Chicago, obviously. This team can be dangerous on any given night. And this team's heading in the right direction around All-Star Cade Cunningham. And I'll tell you what, they're a lot of fun, too. This is a fun team.
Did you see? Sorry, I just got to go back to that Bulls-Pistons game. I watched very little of it because I was like, I'm not spending time on a game that was a ridiculous blowout. Vooch was, I think he was like 0 for 9 on jumpers. And then he finally made one and he like threw his hands up like, thank God for this. And it was just funny. I mean, they just crushed him. But yeah, this all came from Trajan Langdon. Said, hey, this summer, I was not thinking any chance of us being buyers at the trade deadline. And he kind of, said like, we went into the season thinking, all right, let's see what we have. And we're going to have cap space. We'll use that to facilitate deals and get assets. And guess what? They did both.
Yeah.
They were able to get Dennis Schroeder and Lindy Waters, so I think are going to be really helpful for them. Waters was fine. He's a nice depth shooter, which they can use behind Beasley and Hardaway. But Schroeder's really going to help them. Was Schroeder kind of a washout in Golden State? Sure, it didn't work out there. But that's not the right system for him. He's a pick and roll point guard. He's a traditional drive and kick guy. He's not a read and react player. And that's where, put him in the screen game the Pistons use heavily with Jalen Duren, with Isaiah Stewart. Let him be an organizer on the second unit. You're already seeing some of that from him of, hey, don't go, don't cut, like stay. Yeah. If you're going to cut, you're going to drag another defender and they'll play. You're already seeing things like that. So I think this was a really good pickup for them. And they got a couple second-round picks for facilitating and moving guys around. That's good stuff all around for the Pistons. I mean, this is, they're probably never going to be super high on anybody's list of winners. One, because so many bonkers things happened at this trade deadline. And also, it's not like this vaults them into, title contention. But I do think when you look a little deeper, we're going to come back and be like, man, that was a really good trade deadline. And if I'm a Pistons fan, I'm ecstatic about where this team is headed and where they go, not just this year. I mean, you got to be beyond thrilled about this season and that you're playing meaningful games, but where they could be headed down the line is super exciting too.
100%. Where this team is going is very, very exciting. And remember, Jaden Ivey not done for the season. Yeah. He will be back, and that's going to give them that gives them such a dynamic backcourt. They've got the ability to get into teams defensively. They will still have tweaks to make this summer as they kind of figure out what their final form is going to look like or what their team is really going to be. But this has been a great season for the Pistons and a big step forward for them. They're on the right track right now. And again, that wasn't what we were expecting coming into the season. So what are the bright spots in the NBA so far this year?
And thank God, because the Eastern Conference needed it. Because
Sure.
it's a freaking disaster after the top 4 or 5 teams. Like, it's a mess. So glad the Pistons are in there. And they're fun, man. I love watching them play. I love Cade. He's so good. Jalen Duren's doing a lot of really good stuff there. I broke this down on the basketball bulletin the other day. They're putting the ball in his hands and making him make passing reads now more, which is fun. He still has some turnovers. He still does some crazy stuff where he likes to try to rip and run off the boards, and it almost always ends in abject failure where, there's that. It's like what you say about the Rockets. There's a good chance he's going to bean somebody in the 10th row,
right?
As much as make a good play. But in short roll situations in the half court, he's making a lot of reads. And Asar Thompson, let's go, man. He is just,
he and his brother, so much fun.
So fun. Like the two of them. I don't want to shortchange either the Pistons or the Rockets, but man, I want to see them play together at some point on a team because they're just a blast.
They're awesome.
They're so much fun with that. Hey, let's go to our last topic of the day, and the Pistons are a good jumping off point here.
Yeah,
I wrote for Spot Track, as I do throughout the course of the year. Post trade deadline's a big tent pole for us to kind of reset the league. I wrote about 2025 spending power. Where are we going now into the offseason with this? And there is now one team, the Brooklyn Nets, that projects to have cap space. It was 2 for a long time, but the Wizards taking on Chris Middleton and Marcus Smart ate into their cap space for the summer. So it's the Nets. And the Nets could have between 50 and 70 million, depending on what they do with some guys. We'll see how that all comes together for them ultimately. But why I wanted to pause on the Pistons are still a swing team. They could get about 20, just shy of 25 million in cap space. A big part of what changes things for them. They now project to lose their first round pick. That pick that seemingly was protected forever will actually likely go to the Minnesota Timberwolves, which if you're the Knicks, you're probably sitting there like, yeah, we finally traded it and now it's going to go. But they can get there. It's 26 points. 24. I got to fix. There's a typo in there, but it should be 24.6. But that's on me. But anyway, here's why that's important. There's 2 things they can do with that. They get the sense that Malik Beasley is looking at more money elsewhere. They could go the cap space route to give him more money and re-sign him. But if they know non-taxpayer is going to be enough, they can stay over the cap, use the non-taxpayer on Beasley, and then re-sign guys like Dennis Schroeder or Tim Hardaway Jr. if they want to and go that direction. Utah was really highly dependent on John Collins. If he opts out, they could be a cap space team. If he doesn't, they're not going to be. He's not going to opt out.
They might move him if he opts in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the only way he'll opt out is if he's like, I don't want to get stuck going somewhere I don't want to go. I'd rather go, but he's not getting back 26.6 million. That's not going to happen.
And there's just, unless the Brooklyn Nets, we talk about how much money the Brooklyn Nets have. There's not a lot of other teams that have
that's it.
The flexibility. Yep. So he would have to be willing probably to go somewhere for an MLE or execute a sign and trade with Utah.
Yeah. So that's probably not going to happen. Then the Grizzlies, we'll just pause on them very briefly. Weird stuff for the Grizzlies, but fun from a cap nerd perspective. They can create about $7 million in cap space. And normally it'd be like, well, you wouldn't because you just stay over it because the non-taxpayer is worth more than that.
Exactly.
But what they can do with that $7 million is renegotiate and extend Jaren Jackson Jr. Up to about $30 million for next season, then tack years on to that with the big raise. If Triple J makes the All-NBA team, that's out the window. They'll stay over the cap. They won't do that because then they've got the flexibility to sign him to whatever they want extension-wise. But if he doesn't, just keep an eye on that. If it looks like the Grizzlies are getting a little funky with some of their stuff, and crucially, that $7 million is with retaining Santi Aldama's restricted free agent rights, so they can still control the process there. He's a player, though, I could see the Nets coming in and being, oh, you think you're there? Let's now screw this whole thing up for you by throwing him a $20 million plus a year offer sheet and make you match it or whatever they want to do. But
that's a very Nets thing to do.
Exactly. And that was what Sean Marks did, several times when the Nets were pre-KD and Kyrie and rebuilding. So Memphis is in a fun place. We're not going to run through all 30 teams, but you can read this article on Spot Track, catch up where everybody projects to be this summer. I bucketed all 30 teams into one spot or another. So you'll have a sense of, all right, what's my team looking at spending this summer? And just know, not a lot of cap space, which let's crown 2025 again the summer of the trade, because we are going to see major trade action, because it's going to be the only way for teams to really improve. Whenever that happens, we get a whole bunch of trades, and we already know Kevin Durant's probably going to be available. Trae Young, maybe. We've already heard rumblings about that. Who knows where we'll get to, but it's going to be a blast this offseason.
In other words, get ready to hear a lot of this. Let's go. It's going to be a fun
This guy's just getting in the drops before his vacation. I love
That's it. Exactly. I'm scratching that itch while I can right now.
Perfect.
Everybody, make sure you do subscribe to the NBA Front Office Show over on YouTube. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts as well. Till tomorrow. See ya and stay safe.